After the destruction of the two temples in Jerusalem, remembering their destruction and longing for its rebuilding became an essential feature of Jewish thought and life. Shalom, my friends. This is Akiva Gersh with Israel in 5, where we give you everything Israel in 5 minutes. Please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or want to keep the conversation going, please do so below in the comments. We learned previously about the significance of the temple in Jerusalem as a central worship site for the Jewish people. We also learned about its destruction, its first destruction by the Babylonians and the subsequent Babylonian exile, and the different changes that were made and the additions that were brought into Jewish life as a result in order to make up for the loss of the central worship site. Eventually, the Jewish people do come back to the land of Israel and they rebuild the second temple, and that second temple will last for over 400 years, once again bringing sacrifices, the lighting of the menorah and other things back into the daily life of the Jewish people as part of their central worship. What's interesting to note, though, is the synagogues that were created almost as a replacement for the temple during the Babylonian exile will continue to be used. The synagogues will be used alongside the temple, so to speak. They will exist simultaneously, but still the practices of the synagogue will develop over centuries and centuries, as will the prayer service of the Jewish people. It's not something that happened overnight. It was a slow development and something that took a long time and various additions in order to take the form that we are familiar with today. What I want to focus on now is the way that the Jewish people have remembered the destruction of the temples. The Jewish people is longing for it, because eventually the second temple will be destroyed by the Romans in the year 70 CE. That was almost 2,000 years ago. So for most of Jewish history, we have been without the central worship site in Jerusalem, without the temple. Now, we know so many things about the temple because the Jewish people were very good at recording things and learning things and remembering things and passing things on from generation to generation. So we know about the ins and the outs, the details of the various worships and services that took place in the temple. They're written down in various books and collected in order to remember them for a future time that the third temple will be rebuilt. There is an idea in Judaism that there will be a third temple, and the various pieces and parts of the temple will come back into the daily life of the Jewish people, and the various services and rituals that took place there will return as well. Over the last 2,000 years, the Jewish people have built into their tradition various ways and forms of remembering the temple and longing for the temple to be rebuilt. Various things like all kinds of prayers and blessings include mentions of Jerusalem. A Jew who prays every day literally can't avoid mentioning Jerusalem, its significance, the destruction of the temples, and the longing for the temple to be rebuilt. It's built into our daily prayers. It's built into blessings that we say even over our food. And all kinds of other rituals and practices have been developed over the centuries in order to help the Jewish people never forget. One example is at a wedding. At a wedding, the most celebratory, happiest day of the bride and groom's life, during the middle of their high celebration, the groom breaks a glass with his foot in order to remember that even though I'm standing on my happiest day, and even though this is an incredible day, I'm remembering still the brokenness of our world, because the temple is not yet rebuilt, because we're still missing, lacking the temple in Jerusalem. Another ritual that is very common is that when people build a new home, they make it as beautiful as they want, but usually right near the entrance, they leave a little square of the wall undone, unpainted, unfinished, to show that how could I finish my house? How can I make every single piece and part of my house beautiful when God's house, so to speak, the temple in Jerusalem, still doesn't stand where it used to stand, still basically stands in brokenness and destruction. Also, going back to a wedding, oftentimes a groom will put ashes on his forehead also to remember the destruction. In addition to these, we have the fast days. There's multiple fast days throughout the Jewish year that focus on Jerusalem, its significance and its destruction, and once again, the longing for it's rebuilding. So we see over the last few videos, over the last few weeks, we've learned about the temple's significance, what it looked like, what the priests did there, what the Levites did there, the different sacrifices, the different rituals, the music that happened there. We learned about the temple's destruction and how the Jewish people overcame that very, very significant challenge to their faith and to their practice. And now we're focusing on the various ways that the Jewish people remember Jerusalem, never forget Jerusalem, right? It says in the book of Psalms, if I forget Jerusalem, let my right hand wither, right? How many generations of Jews have said those words, right, with tears in their eyes, right? Remembering the past, remember when Jerusalem used to stand, remember the destruction of the past, and looking towards the future, longing for its rebuilding. We'll end with a little story. There's a story that Napoleon, when he was in Italy on his conquests around the world, he passed a synagogue, and that day happened to be a fast day for Jerusalem, the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, and he heard the Jews inside wailing and crying. And he asked somebody, he said, "Why are the Jews crying? What's going on in there?" And the person answered, "Well, they're crying over the destruction of their temple." He said, "Oh, wow, okay. When was their temple destroyed?" And he said, "Thousands of years ago." And Napoleon said there on the spot, a people who remember their past, a people who remember the destruction of their past will be destined to rebuild it in their future. Right? So remembering is such a strong, strong tool in order to rebuild a future that we're longing for. All the best, my friends, and be well.